but one day I came home and it was like 3:00, and my daughter, I think she's 3 or 4 at the time, and she asked, Daddy, what are you doing here? And I said, I came home to spend some time with you guys. And she's like, but it's still light outside. And it was a pretty immediate, that was hard for me to take. And I was, at that point in time, I was still about, I don't know, probably 3 years from even being eligible to retire. And 3 or 4, not do the math right at the moment, but I still had a few years left, and I pretty much decided like I didn't want to just take off the uniform and come back in to do the same thing in the same environment. I knew I had to off-road, so I would say early on, I wasn't very present. Fortunately, the kids were very young at that age, and I would hope didn't notice, but obviously my daughter did, at that age. So I was blessed in England, and but that was one of the very important things that I made this transition over this past year. My decision not to, have a 9 to 5 or any kind of specific W-2, and even as I build my business as an entrepreneur, it takes a lot of intentionality. To design my schedule. And that's one of the things I've kind of worked on over this past year is to design my schedule in a way that, I can be present.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Biz Dad podcast. Thank you so very much for listening to the next episode. Today we have Marcus Long on. I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with him. He is also a military veteran, served 21 years in the Navy, but also does a bunch of real estate stuff, which is great. So we could talk real estate and military all day long. So hopefully if you're listening to this, that intrigues you, but also a father of 2 kiddos. But I will let him introduce his family, his business, tell us a bit about him. But Marcus, thank you so much for jumping on. Like I said, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and your business.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, Adam. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on today, and really, just for creating and promoting an environment, where we kind of have these conversations to kind of help each other out. And so, as you mentioned, I'm a husband to my beautiful bride, Amy, and father to 9-year-old Layla, 9-year-old daughter, and my 6-year-old son, Jackson. And so, just a little bit of, kind of my background stuff. I grew up in most of my childhood, one of 5 kids in northeast rural Missouri. And so I was kind of in the middle, a couple older brothers, a couple younger sisters, and I enlisted for the Navy, right out of high school. And I left, as I mentioned earlier, I was a cryptologist. I did 1 tour at sea and got selected for a commissioning program, went back to the University of Missouri, go Tigers. And after that's where I actually met my wife, Amy, is while we were in college there together. And she was in the ROTC program and stuff. I got commissioned in late 2007 and moved out to Hawaii. And she kind of moved out there probably 6-7 months later when she got commissioned and got orders as well. And I was riding subs. She was on a ship and stuff. And we got married during that time in Hawaii. We didn't see a whole lot of each other, while we were in Hawaii, as well as our next tour. We moved to San Diego after getting married. We were both on ships. So those first, probably 4 years or so of kind of being married, we were both going to sea quite a bit, some back-to-back deployments. There was a lot of time apart. And we eventually did a short tour in San Diego. I was a Third Fleet staff and Admiral staff. And towards the middle of that, or latter half, Amy went to the reserves as we had our first daughter, Layla, in 2014. And 2014. And so after we left San Diego, we had to do some quick public math there real quick. And we moved to Colorado. I was at the aerospace data facility out in Colorado. That's where our son Jackson was born. And then my final tour in the Navy, we had the opportunity to go to England. I was a U.S. Cybercom exchange officer to the United Kingdom. And so that's where I spent my final 3 years in the Navy, and just retired last October, so just a year ago this month. And we ended up deciding to move back here to kind of the Kansas City area. I say back to the Midwest, if you will. About 3 hours from where I grew up. But a lot of family stuff kind of drove that. Living in Hawaii and San Diego and things, we thought we'd maybe go to a coast. Colorado was beautiful and sunny and stuff as well. But the kids didn't get to spend a lot of time around I have a large extended family and pretty close in many ways, and they didn't get to see a lot of them. And so that drove some decisions to kind of, be back around the Midwest, be closer to grandparents and cousins and things of that nature. So that's kind of what brought us to this area for the time being. And I had started, I've been, in real estate, and my real estate journey has kind of, spread throughout my military career. That's probably kind of how it got started. And as I invested in other stuff, and I got a lot more serious and intentional about it, a couple of years ago, as I was looking at my transition out of the military, kind of on the horizon. And, what I didn't want a 9-to-5 for some very specific reasons. And it kind of drove me to be a little bit more systematic instead of opportunistic in my real estate journey. And so, that's kind of what I'm doing now. Primarily, my focus inside real estate now is, helping educate and provide opportunity to investors, passive investors, through the acquisition of multifamily and other commercial real estate and stuff, so that they can kind of focus on the things that are important in their life, whether that's their W-2 or travel or the family or whatever. So I'm just really enjoying doing that, as well as being more present and available as a father and as I work through this transition. So that's kind of where I am today.
Awesome. Yeah. The military life can really, it does that to a lot of people. Either they get focused on what the heck am I going to do after? I want nothing to do with this type of thing anymore. I need to figure something out. Or they take off the uniform on Friday, put on a suit on Monday, and they're back in the same seat. It's like, it tends to be what you typically see, at least on the Air Force side. That's what we always saw. But
yeah, and it's pretty similar, in my work as a cryptologic warfare officer and stuff. There's a lot of contract or government jobs, and it's very similar. They come back in doing the same thing, and those opportunities certainly available. But, I think that for me, a lot of the deeper reasons why I chose to start to off ramp and get out of the military, I kind of felt like if I did that, I would kind of be doing the same thing and the same. And I really just felt like I needed to switch up my own environment and stuff, so that I could be more present, husband and father and friend and things like that. So,
yeah, no, I hear that for sure. That was part of the motivating factor for me to jump ship. And enough was enough. It was hard to be present when you're getting sent around the world all over the place, when you're doing deployments, when you're doing this, when you're doing that. So I completely hear that. So you said you were one of 5 kids. So tell me a little bit about your life growing up, about your parents, what it was like growing up as a kid.
Yeah. So, looking back, like we have so many great memories. And, I think our in-laws and stuff appreciate us sharing some of that. And, shortly after I was born, the family moved to Colorado for about 7 years. And my father went to college out there during the time. He managed a large horse and cattle ranch and stuff. So I had 2 older brothers. One was about 4 years older than me. The other one was about 2 years older than me. And then my sisters are kind of similar, 2 to 3 years younger and 4 to 5 years younger. So fairly evenly spread out. And, I think that we came from a pretty humble background and stuff. I have memories of times of going to, pick up cans to buy school supplies and stuff for my oldest brother and stuff. So there's certainly some of those in my memories, but like we never went without. My parents, my mom was a teacher for most all of my childhood, and still just until recently when she retired. And my father was, in ranching and farming. He also worked in school systems and stuff as well. And so we were out in Colorado about 7 years, moved back to Missouri, where a lot of our family was kind of central there. Father, like I said, worked on cattle farms and things of that nature. And a pretty close family. I have like my mom's side of the family has, 10, I think she has 10 brothers and sisters. And so a lot of first cousins, a lot of family around, and really a big support system in many ways. And in 2006, I guess it was probably when I was about 13 years old. And my family started a business, horse training, and we had a tack shop, and we raised a lot of horses and things. So I had a little bit of a family business, spent a lot of time together there. And so as time went over, I come from those humble beginnings, and even on the farm and stuff, never had, a lot and over abundance and stuff. But I think as we look back, the memories that we created and stuff were probably more valuable than a lot of the tangible aspects. But so, brothers, we were all like, the siblings were fairly close. We had our sibling differences, if you will.
No
but
way.
we went
I
to
don't believe that. 5 of you guys, and you
yeah,
had sibling differences? Not a chance.
I haven't met any other families like that and stuff yet. But yeah, we're close. Like my mom, we went to a private school, up through like 8th grade, and our town from a small town, so then went over to a public school after that. And, my mom and other family members were a large part of the staff, the teachers and stuff in that school system.
Okay.
And so it gives you kind of a little basis, and happy to kind of dig in there wherever you like.
Yeah, for sure. So from 1 to 7, or basically birth to 7, I mean, you were born right and then moved straight to Colorado after that till 7 years old, and then you moved back, you said?
Yeah, we went back to Missouri, kind of near where I was born, and that's really where I grew up until I left for the Navy.
Okay. So, you mentioned the experiences, and one thing for me, the experiences were always the things that I remembered the most. Mm-hmm. I grew up very much, the only time we got to experience a lot was like we never went on vacations. We never did any of that. There was no money for that. So when the military moved my dad, that's when we got to go on a vacation, because we were driving across the country. So it was like, man, this is great. We get to stay in this really nice hotel. These really cool things. But I think that it's led me to want to give the experiences to my kids as well, and try to bring them around different places. And you mentioned in your bio that your kids have been to like 8 or 9 different countries. So do you think that your memory of the experiences there has led you to want to give the same thing to your kids, or was just, hey, I'm in England, so we might as well travel around? How do you think that kind of went?
So I think there's a combination of things there, right? Is like similar, as you mentioned, we didn't take a lot of big vacations and stuff. A lot of times in the summer, we'd go to, St. Louis for, a long weekend, go to a ball game in the zoo and things like that. Went to Branson or whatever, but we didn't take a lot of large vacations and stuff either. Mm-hmm. But especially today, we're in our 30s and 40s, all my siblings. And when we get together, as a family, as I mentioned earlier, kind of like, we do have rich memories, and our in-laws, like the spouses and stuff, point that out a lot of times. And they're like, man, I don't remember all this kind of stuff from our childhood and things. So I certainly do think that, having an appreciation for the experiences and stuff, it encourage my wife and I to want to create that for our children. I think another aspect of the wanting to travel and stuff is to help our kids appreciate culture, in many ways, from both ways. Like right now, they've went to a lot of places in Europe and got to appreciate some different culture and stuff like that. And we haven't done as much of this, but like longer term, I also want to take them to other places like Africa and, mission trips and things like that. So that they can also have an appreciation of culture and appreciation for the things that they do have. Because I think that's a balance, as we grow up, and, we talk about not having a lot material stuff growing up. And sometimes that encourages us to want to provide that for our children. But, I don't want to go far right and them have those things, but not necessarily an appreciation of how privileged, they might be.
Yeah, so much agree with that. Yeah, it's, we even asked our son, this is going to be the first year that we're doing it, but we asked the boys, would they rather us buy them, a gift or two, or have an experience for their birthday? And it was overwhelmingly, no, we want an experience. So, we're going to take them on a cruise. They're going to go have some fun on for their birthday. Their birthdays are within like a week and a half of each other. So we're going to take the boys out on a cruise and go do an experience and go check out Mexico and do different. And like, to me, that is so much more important to understand that, to get those experiences and those memories and where they come from. And maybe that's because that's what sticks out in my brain as well, as those are the types of things that I remember as a child, more than just about anything else, is the places that we got to visit. I certainly don't remember really any of my toys. I've talked to some of my friends who are like, oh yeah, I remember the G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip and all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't remember any of that. I couldn't tell you any toys that I had other than my BB gun, because I ran around the woods with that BB gun in my hand constantly. So that's the only thing I really remember.
That's probably what I could tell you. We had BB guns and like horses. A lot of our experiences around horses and stuff, but not toys and things like that. I probably couldn't tell you too much there. Yeah,
not at all. So tell me specifically about your dad, and kind of what sticks out to you as like the one or two things that you really think you took from your father as a dad yourself now.
Yeah, so I was kind of thinking about this, and I've had the opportunity recently to kind of ponder some stuff. And Dad was pretty influential, still is, but certainly like growing up and as I left home and stuff, I spent a lot of time with my dad. And I think that one thing is when I'm thinking about it and thinking about like some parents today and stuff, like dad was very present with us in general, right? Like, he didn't have to be deployed military wise, or, he wasn't on the road and stuff like that a lot. Like he was present around home. He wasn't necessarily the sports coach and stuff, but he was at most of our sporting events. We did like 4-H and things like that when we were young. Yeah. He was very involved in, instructing. And even, sometimes when there wasn't other instructors kind of stepping up to do something that maybe he wasn't even comfortable with a little bit. So he was always there to do that. And, the family was always went to church together on a regular basis. So always present. And as I mentioned, we were about 13. I worked on the farm even at a very young age and spent a lot of time with dad. But when I was 13 is kind of when we started officially started the horse business. And, there was a level of, he gave us a voice, even at that young age, he gave us a voice in the business. He asked our opinion. There was a lot of expectation, for the work that we did. We learned a lot of hard work. And I think that said, that's a lot of the things that influence. And also like as we built that business, one thing I can tell you is like we didn't do very much marketing in the business. It was a lot of word of mouth, and I think a lot of that was because of the man my father was. He was kind of a man of his word. He was honest with people and transparent. I got to, kind of a firsthand look at that, like day in and day out, like particularly in the summer, when we weren't in school, but even during the school year, after school when I was home or things like that, just to see his interaction and stuff. And not all children get to see their parents in that work environment. And that was like his work and how he dealt with customers. And so I think, having a front row seat to seeing a lot of that was pretty impactful, as I left home and the man that I became, in the Navy and my business and for my family.
Yeah. Okay. So what were your roles at 13 years old in the business and, in the ranching world?
Yeah. So, we had some of the not so glorious ones, like cleaning stalls and, the chores, the feeding, the horses and stuff. But Dad trusted us a lot too. Like he taught us, he went to college for horse training and management. Okay. And, he managed the ranch when we were in Colorado. And so dad taught us a lot at home about horse stuff. And although, we were focused on training, like dad had he wasn't a vet necessarily, but he taught us how to care and do a lot of medical type stuff. And my brother was actually a farrier, did some horseshoeing and things like that. So he taught us a broad spectrum of skills around that and how to train. And so we rode and trained a lot of horses, and we rode a horse just like dad did. And so, our customers knew, that sometimes it was a 13, 14, 15-year-old boy that was doing a lot of the training, but dad was there to kind of, to watch and to monitor and, step in if he needed to step in. But we probably took on he gave us very equivalent responsibilities as he was doing.
Yeah. Awesome. So did you guys trained horses for other people so that they could have a fully trained horse, like breaking them and all that type of stuff?
We did. Yeah. A lot of, a variety of things, not necessarily, trail horses, some cattle work, just like good solid riding horses. I would say like, people that wanted like really finished show horses or something. A lot of times like we would start them and then they might take them to someone to finish, or, we would, some race horses, we'd like leg them up and get them in shape. And then they would take them to like a professional for race training and stuff like that. But we really specialized on anywhere from probably the first 30 to 120 days on a horse.
Interesting. Yeah, so I used to be a dog handler back in the day, and so other people I've talked to, like training an animal is training an animal. So I'm always curious about how that works. So not that we need to spend a bunch of time in this podcast to discuss that, but I'm interested. That's my wife loves horses, so if I could figure out how to do that and bring horses into her world, I'm sure she'd be thrilled. We just have to convince her to retire at 20, so that way we can do that and not have to worry about moving the horses. But
it makes it a little more challenging.
Especially if they send us to overseas again or something, right? So good luck with that. All right. So fast forward, you join the military, you get married, you have kids. Tell me, like, what are your kids' favorite thing to do right now? Especially, I wanna hit on the fact. You've been retired for a year, especially over the last year. What has been kind of their go-to now that they've got their dad full time, quote unquote full time?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say that my son is at the age that he's starting to get bigger into sports, right? So like this year, he had early on had a soccer. So when we were in England, he kind of started playing like some soccer and stuff at school. They had some, lessons and things like that. But he's just at the age now where really the first organized seasons of soccer, baseball, flag football. And so, he's very much enjoying that. And when he wants me to play with them, that's often, Dad, can we go in the backyard and throw the ball? And sometimes in that, in a 30-minute session, we do all three, do one for a little bit and make a switch and things like that. So my daughter is, she's a little less interested in like team sports. She's a little more artsy. She loves to draw. She reads a lot, but her kind of from a physical thing and stuff is she's gotten into aerial arts, aerial silks and stuff like that since we kind of came back in the past year. And that was interesting. We moved here and had dinner with a friend that I went to school with before the school year started, and her daughter was doing it, similar age, and was doing that. That's kind of what exposed my daughter to it. And so we've got her into lessons doing that. She's really enjoyed it, which I appreciate too, because it's artistic, but also something like physical, and stuff for her to do. So those are some of like the kind of activities and stuff, if you will, that they've really been enjoying over the past year.
Okay, very good. And I would imagine just being involved in it is probably going to be a lot more fun. I don't know how involved were you able to be with your previous? I know some military jobs. I hear that. I mean, some folks I talk to, they're like, "Oh yeah, I work like 6 hours a day. It's no big deal." And I'm like, I never had one of those jobs. I don't know. But what kind of life do you feel like you had while you, as a dad, in the military versus now that you're out?
Yeah. So, I will say that I was blessed in my final tour in England of the sense that it was I wasn't at a military base. It was kind of a civilian closed job. I was like the only U.S. military at the location where I was. And, of course, COVID and stuff happened too. So I spent a lot more time at home, but in that job also, like in England, they did a lot of the activities, particularly at the school that our children were in at the age they were in. Like, they went swimming during the school day. They, did a lot of soccer during the school day. They did a lot of that stuff during the school day. So that was nice from a organizational perspective and not having to, run all over town for all these different things. But it didn't give us necessarily the opportunity to be quite as involved, with them. And of course, we were at home a lot.
Yeah.
But I will say that, prior to that, and really one of the, I've kind of shared this story in the past a few times. Like, one of the things that drove me to decide to get out of the military was in my tour prior to that, when we were in Colorado. And I was even on a, shore duty, if you will. And I was, working, I was away from home probably 10 to 12 hours a day, pretty regularly. I was usually at the office at 6 o'clock and generally was trying to, make it home in time for dinner and stuff. And one day I came home and it was like 3 o'clock, and, my daughter, I think she's 3 or 4 at the time, and she asked, "Daddy, what are you doing here?" And I said, I came home to spend some time with you guys. And she's like, "But it's still light outside." And, it was a pretty immediate, that was hard for me to take. And I was, at that point in time, I was still about, I don't know, probably 3 years from even being eligible to retire. And 3 or 4, I'm not do the math right at the moment, but I still had a few years left, and I pretty much decided I really don't have any interest in promoting and continuing on. I said, and that goes back to, as I mentioned earlier, like, I didn't want to just take off the uniform and come back in to do the same thing in the same environment. I knew I had to off-road, so I would say early on, I wasn't very present. Fortunately, the kids were very young at that age. And I would hope didn't notice, but obviously my daughter did, at that age. So I was blessed in England, and but that was one of the very important things that I made this transition over this past year. My decision not to, have a 9 to 5 or any kind of specific W-2. And even as I build my, business as an entrepreneur, it takes a lot of intentionality, to design my schedule. And that's one of the things I've kind of worked on over this past year, is to design my schedule in a way that, I can be present as they're getting ready to go to school for the day. My wife a lot of times goes to the gym. I kind of help, wake them up, make breakfast, make their lunch if they're sitting, and things like that. I mentioned before we started recording, I just got back from the school. I was volunteering at the school cafeteria today, and like to be able to work that kind of stuff into my schedule. And so most of my calls I do kind of during the day, usually like once they're out of the house from school, and like try to get them finished before, they come home. And that way, when they come home from school, they play out in the street a lot with the neighborhood kids and stuff. And if they're doing that, maybe I'll continue to work on something. But if they come in and say, "Hey, Dad, can we go throw the ball in the backyard?" The answer is yes. Yeah. Right. Like I have nothing that is in the calendar it's going to take away from that. And then so I'm available for their ball games and stuff like that. So it has been a shift, but it was a very intentional decision and still something I work on every day to make sure that I kind of stand true to the priorities and what I said I was doing things for.
Yeah. I think that's one of the hardest parts. And, from what the conversations I've had is we tend to, in the military side, they're telling us what to do, right? The military's telling you what to do, where to go. And it's, hey, I'm going because I have to. And, even if we don't have to spend 12 hours a day at work, we still feel like we have to just because of what our duties are and where we're at. And there's always that pull. And I've noticed that the entrepreneurs can tend to do the same thing. Like, I'm doing all of this for my family. I'm pushing hard. I'm growing this thing so that I can, for my family. When was the last time you saw them? I don't know, 2 weeks ago, right? Like, okay, so are you really doing it for your family? So that intentionality behind that, and what has been your thought on, as you're doing that intentionality? Like, have you thought about the long term, right? Where you want your business to grow to, where you want your net worth, your passive income, all of that stuff to grow to, versus the time spent with the kids. And I don't know how to word that better at the moment, but I mean, there's obviously the more time we spend with our kids, the harder it is to grow our business the way we want to. But man, the kids are that's one of the biggest whys behind what we're doing. So how have you kind of started thinking through that and balancing that out?
Yeah. So, it's a great question. Like I have my, family goals and business goals and stuff. And, without getting into necessarily the black and whites of those, I think that for me, something I kind of realized is like, sure, I want to grow the business, but it's not, even things I've done in the past year, the partners that I work with and things like that. Early on, I was thinking like, hey, I'm going to do more in our partnership so that I can have a bigger chunk of the pie. Right. Like that was my thought process before I left the military and some of the early partnerships as we started some stuff. And what I realized really is, hey, I have some partners that are phenomenal in certain aspects of our business. And while it's great for us to each understand the different roles and things like that, I really become okay with having a smaller chunk of the pie, and it being more flexible, me not having to spend as much time, so sometimes the roles that I'm good at and choose to do provide me more flexibility and don't have certain like time constraints on when we do them and stuff. And I, I really, I think sometimes we think, and of course, my business name and stuff like a long legacy and stuff, like sometimes when we think like legacy, whatever, we talk about like the things that we pass down monetarily or, things like that. And even since I started, the business a few years ago, it's helped me. And of course, because we were connected through Stu Grazier and stuff and the Kinetic Man Mastermind. And I've surrounded myself with other men and stuff, and the conversations I have with them on a weekly basis have really helped me to appreciate, these the other aspects of a legacy. The things we do, the memories, the experiences that we create. There's a lot of ways to kind of pass down a legacy other than just monetarily. So I think, the conversations with some people that are a little bit further along than I am. And, I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Family Board Meeting, but kind of like the subtitle of it, 18 Summers to Create a Lasting Impression. And, so recently when my daughter turned 9 years old, I was kind of like, oh man, that's halfway through. Right. So, yeah. So I think that, having conversations like we're having today, having conversations like I'm having in the tribe, of men that I'm with, have really, it's not always easy, right? But have helped me, and I hate to use the word balance because it's a constant balancing act. Yeah. But I think they have helped me prioritize and appreciate this time with my family. Like we have enough, right? Like I don't need to grow the business for us necessarily. My desire to grow the business is more to help other people, and from a monetary perspective, to be able to give back more and things of that nature, right, and stuff. And so I don't know if it's probably not a black and white answer or anything to your question, but it is something that's a constant conversation with myself, with my spouse, like with my friends of men and stuff as we talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's it should be the way it is a constant push and pull, like trying to figure out which direction you need to go. And what sort of conversations have you had with Amy about this, about like what your goals are as parents, what your goals are as business operators, and how involved is she on the business side of the house?
Yeah, so first, to answer the easy one, is she's not really involved in the business. So she, I don't remember if it was before we were recording, but she's in the Navy as well. Been about 16 years or so. Split some time between active and reserves, but right now she's on active duty for a couple of years, and so she's kind of full time doing that. Even before, when she was just doing reserve, I shouldn't say just, when she was doing reserve time there, she was not involved in the real estate business. She's aware, she knows many of my partners. If something were happening to me, she would know who to go to ask and stuff about them. So she's aware, but not in the details. From a conversation perspective and stuff, I won't say that we necessarily have a great like framework, week by week or anything, but like we do things like the, annual like kind of couples goal, retreat, couple goal retreat and stuff, where we talk about like, what are our business goals? What are our goals for our family? All within like a day or two. So we're having those kind of conversations. What characteristics do we want our kids to kind of grow up with and stuff? And then I think that, kind of throughout the year. And so, of course, my conversations also with like within the Kinetic Man tribe and the things we're doing kind of give me an opportunity, because we talk about some different topics each month and stuff. And those give me an opportunity to kind of refresh and think about what I'm thinking about it. But then also, maybe ask Amy a few questions like, hey, this is what we're talking about. Like, here's some thoughts I had. Do you agree or not agree? Or just kind of have a kind of a nonchalant conversation, but it kind of sees if we're on the same page. And, I think like day to day, it is more like we kind of observe our kids, like the characteristics that they're having. Do we like, behavior type stuff, and we kind of have conversations, maybe the kids are outside playing, and, we say like, Layla's had, X behavior recently. I'm not sure what's causing that. And like, think about like, hey, is it something that we're doing? Yeah. That we can adjust? Like, are we not giving them enough focus, or, trying to reward? Like last night, Jackson had a baseball game, and, he just, it was really awesome to watch his like, him high-fiving his teammates, even when something like not great happens, or, his hustling and stuff down the baseline. We just try to like reward that kind of stuff. And to get back, to the point you're kind of making, I think that one example I've given, to a lot of people is I mentioned earlier, being present for the kids in the morning. And it used to be that, I was trying to get work done. I'd go wake them up, go back to my computer, try to get some work done. They went back. They're not dressed right. Like I get upset because I get upset. They get upset. The whole morning routine was a disaster. Yeah. And so that was one of the things when we came back, like I have an hour on my calendar that's like time with the kids. Yeah. Right. And it generally makes things a lot smoother, where I can go wake them up and kind of be patient, just kind of spend some time with them. They know that I'm there for them. It's a lot smoother of a morning and stuff. And so I think that we kind of let these like daily, how's the family doing? How are the kids doing? Not necessarily drive the conversation, but I think we can see like, okay, maybe I spent a little bit too much time on the business, and I need to focus on the kids a little bit more right now, and things like that, whether you can kind of shift back and forth. So.
Okay. Do you guys have the type of relationship, you and your wife, that you're able to call each other out on those types of things? Wow, my dog is jumping up on my desk. Lovely. Oh.
Yeah, I think we do. We try not to do that in front of the kids. to try to show that support. And I think that we are, we generally have that kind of conversation. And I don't know if it's always black and white where you're calling out like, hey, you really screwed this one up. So sometimes it's kind of like, hey, what's been going on, and kind of asking to kind of see where the other person is. Maybe there's some stuff going on in my business that I haven't like expressed, but she might be able to see that, kind of physically, or maybe I've been a little bit different the past week or things like that. And so she kind of asks and kind of gives me the hint, that, hey, the kids could use some time, or vice versa and stuff. So yeah, I think we're pretty good about being open. I think the harder part probably for a lot of us is being receptive, of that. Like, is even sometimes we often know it's the truth, when we get called out. It probably hurts because we know it's the truth. Right. And so I think being receptive of that and trying to adjust our actions kind of going forward.
Yeah. I think that reception, especially, I don't know, this is obviously a generalization, but as men, we don't really, want to hear some of those things like, no, I'm doing this because I need to do blah, 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 whatever. And but we definitely need to be able to hear that. And dang, damn it, he got something off my desk. 1 second. Man, get a puppy, they said. Sure, yeah, get a puppy while you have a baby in the house. Yeah.
It'll be great.
Man, oh man, it'll be wonderful. Yeah. And, in case my kids don't try to get on the podcast enough, now I've got my dog wanting to get on the podcast. Lovely.
Well, I was going to, say, and it's something I was going to comment on earlier, actually, is like, I've listened to a few episodes, and, I know they pop in from time to time. And, I have an appreciation for, that, your patience and nonchalance about that, because actually, interestingly enough, Stu Grazer that connected us, like we had some conversations, even going back a couple of years ago when I was in England and first starting to really spend a lot of time on Zoom and phone calls for the business. Early on, I'd kind of get frustrated, like, the kids like, you're making too much noise, like get out of the camera, whatever. And my wife probably will tell you that I still kind of, get concerned about the noise, just because sometimes it gets so loud that like I'm having a hard time hearing myself think and conversate. But point being is that over time, as we talk about doing the business for the family and stuff like that, like, it's not a big deal if my son like walks in here and sits on my lap for a few minutes while I'm talking to somebody and things like that. And so I kind of got, more comfortable and open with that. And, I think that's another example. Like if I'm always just shoving them out, like all they know is like daddy's behind a computer, like it doesn't mean anything to them. I'm not doing it for them. Right. Yeah. And so for them to be able to come in and see, and they start to, see some familiar faces. They see some of my partners that they know and have, we've been with overseas and things, and, they get to wave to them and say hi. And that makes it a little bit more them understanding, like, oh, okay, I understand what dad's doing. And it's not just, something that they don't understand behind a computer.
Yeah. Too often, though, they walk in and I have a spreadsheet open or something in front of me, and they're like, I don't even know what the heck you're doing, Dad. Right. But I think that, to me, involving them in some of these conversations and involving them in the understanding of what the business is. And like even this morning, my 4-year-old was like, Daddy, come do this thing. I was like, buddy, Daddy's got to work. And he's like, why do you have to work? And I said, well, so that we can earn money and we can, do this stuff. I don't understand why sitting there is earning you money. Like, I was like, all right, well, let's chat about what that means. Mommy's at an office somewhere and that's where she's earning money. And I'm in this office earning money and having the conversations. And it's one of the reasons even I started doing homeschool is so that I could influence them a little bit more and be a little bit more involved in what they're actually learning across the board, not just the pure, hey, here's math and science and social studies and all the stuff, but like as a whole, like here's business stuff, here's life stuff, here's a struggle that daddy's having at work, here's like all of the stuff I want them to be involved in and be a part of and get to see it. It does, I mean, honestly, it does. I think it's a lot more difficult to do it this way for sure. There's some struggles involved, but one of the guys that I talked to about the homeschool before I started doing the homeschool, he was like, hey, the biggest thing I keep telling myself is is there going to be a time where I'm mad that I had that much extra time with my kids? And the answer is always going to be no. And it's, that there's no way I'm going to be upset about that. However, this dog, I might get upset about that. Goodness gracious. What are you doing, dude?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're sitting there like talking about like the kids being around, like the homeschool and stuff, and kind of, I mean, it reminds me, as I was talking about earlier, like the amount of time I spent with my dad.
Yeah.
On the farm or things like that, and so there's a lot of lessons. Like, and dad probably never like claimed to be like a businessman. He and mom, like even today, like I help them like thinking about like investment type stuff. They taught us when we were younger, like we did the 4-H and, sold hogs and whatever. So they kind of taught us like, hey, you give X amount to, church and we save this much and you can have this much for spending. And, so they helped us, like we went and got like loans and, basic finance type stuff. And then by being with him every day, we had like inventory in the tax shop and being able to do like a sales receipt for somebody or whatever. And so, like I said, dad would never probably consider himself like a businessman and things like that. But I learned a lot of lessons, or at least like enough to kind of get me started and interested in going a certain way from the amount of time I spent around him. And it's harder, in some ways to do this when we're doing a lot behind the computer and stuff instead of like out at the barn or in a shop or whatever that might be. And so sometimes it probably takes a little bit more intentionality, for us to try to incorporate them and see how we can, share some of those lessons.
Yeah, it's the intentionality. I think that has been said probably 6 times since we've been talking. Just like being intentional, right? It's got to be a part of it. And to me, I mean, it's mandatory. Like I used to say, and I still, if I'm completely honest, struggle with it. I'm trying to convince myself the other direction. But some people were like, "Hey, you need to be intentional about your calendar, in so much that you even put the time in there for your kids. Like this is time for your kids in your calendar." And I used to hate that because I told myself, I was like, "Man, why? I don't want to just make room on my calendar for my kids, and like they're just another part of my calendar." And then somebody basically, verbally slapped me across the face. It was like, no. What you're doing is you're protecting that time so that nobody else can get involved in any of that time. That is their time, all the time, their time. And I'm like, man, that is definitely a better way of looking at it. And like changing that perspective and that understanding of how I even look at it, like the intentionality behind even perspective can change like the will and desire to do certain things. Anyways, you mentioned a couple times church. So did you grow up in the church? It sounds like. And what first off, what kind of church, and then what was it like? Growing up in your faith.
Yeah, so I grew up Catholic. I've been Catholic all my life. My mom's side of the family was predominantly Catholic. My dad grew up Baptist, later became a Catholic, and today he's a retired Catholic deacon. So he became a deacon in the church after I had left home and stuff. But yeah, I grew up a Catholic. The family, always in the church. When we moved back to Missouri, my mom had a job at the Catholic school, and that's where we all went to school. All my siblings and I went up into the 8th grade, and then small town, everyone went to the public school. So yeah, I mean, it was pretty, admittedly, at a young age, you kind of, our parents went, so we always went. And, sometimes I think it's easy. And I think this is, regardless of faith and stuff, a lot of times it's like, it can be kind of routine, and it gets to a point where you think, oh, this is just kind of routine. But how much am I there present and stuff? And I think that's true. That could be true for adults in reality and stuff. It's like, oh, I go on Sundays, but are you really present when you go? But I think even if it does become routine at times, I think that routine is important, because the difference of when you are there or not. And there, admittedly, and I even, I remember, challenging, my parents at times, like when it was time for me to get confirmed, in high school, my parents helped with like the confirmation stuff. And, the whole thing was like, when you were baptized, someone else made that choice for you. And now when you're being confirmed, like that's you making that choice for yourself.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, we're in high school. Like a lot of us are still here because our parents want us to be here. Right. And that wasn't like me not wanting to be confirmed. I was just like, it still seems like our parents are kind of, like, and it wasn't forced. My parents weren't forceful. They were very good. And people that know them, know, especially with my dad being a deacon now, and my mom does a lot of ministry and things like that. My parents are very open and easy to have conversations with about this kind of stuff. But, and then, when I went to the Navy, I never necessarily like left the faith, but it became much more difficult. How like deployments and stuff, things like not having, you get out of the habit of going to mass or church or, whatever, depending on your religion and stuff. And just like any other habit, that can be very difficult to kind of come back to. And stuff. And there were sometimes I was on deployments where my faith was probably stronger, because the challenges I was going to, or even if I wasn't going to mass on Sunday type of thing, it was still I needed something. And, that's kind of one of the things I fell back on. And certainly as we, started having children, my wife and I became, more, I'll say intentional and stuff again, but to make sure we were going on a regular basis. And again, even at a young age, I think if they're not always like present, but then like them seeing us there and involved, and it drove a lot of our decisions, too, as we were coming back to the States, recently. And I live in a great county, southwest of Kansas City. Public school system, is probably pretty solid, for public schools. Mm-hmm. And I had some friends that kind of, asked me like, why these are like some of the best schools in the country. Like, why are you sending your kids to a private school, paying money out of pocket to do that? And, there's a few reasons there, but like one of them is like the private school they go to today, it's right next door, to the church. And much like when I was young, they go to mass during the week. We go again, like on the weekend. The church is very much ingrained, church leadership is ingrained and works very closely connected with the school. And, that faith and that type of presence in the school system is just part of their daily life, and stuff. And so it's been a priority, for us.
Awesome. And I think there were some parallels in what you're saying too with the church and the business. Like the business can become so, it just is on autopilot and you don't really think about it. But if but for having that system already there, right? And the Bible kind of lays out a bunch of stuff that we should be doing. And if we're able to, especially in the Catholic Church, there's even, the Catholic Church has laid out a bunch of things, and that keeps everybody in that rhythm and keeps that business, obviously not church not being a business, but keeps that business rolling the same way that if we have that stuff set up in our business and that stuff set up in our life, sure, it may be routine, but that means you're routinely checking the boxes and making sure things happen that help kind of move those things forward. But I think you also hit on a point that, if it becomes too routine and you're not thinking through those things, are you really growing? Are you growing in your faith? Is your business growing the way it needs to be? Are you growing as a dad the way you need to be? Or are you just hitting the check marks to make sure that, you're fulfilling the requirements this week for, insert, part of my life here? What have you done to kind of avoid that? I'm going to turn that back to the business side. Like, have you found that being a thing in the business side for you before or currently? And if not, why do you think you haven't found yourself just stuck in a routine?
So, it's a good question. I don't know if I would necessarily say I'm felt super stuck yet. I'm probably like on the earlier, there's been enough like transition a little bit, right? The first couple of years that after I started, it was kind of before I retired, and it was, I was working the military job during the day a lot of times. And of course, this was in England. So I'd come home, usually a couple hours in the morning before I went to work. I'd do the military job, come home and, sometimes be on calls or stuff till 10 o'clock at night. We were 6 hours ahead of the time zone in which, most of our operations and stuff were. So I'd be making calls and Zoom and stuff like that. And so I certainly don't think there was a lot of time during that period to get bogged down. I was trying to build it kind of quickly to ensure that it was a little further down the runway as I made the transition. And I will say this whole like last year since we kind of moved back and I'm balancing that business and family and stuff like that. There's some times I'm trying to figure out like what is the right amount of time, but it has been that's been one of my focuses over this year, is to try to think about, like, for the family and myself, like, where do we kind of want to be? And so perhaps the reason I haven't felt like I've gone too routine and, just been with the family all the time and no business is just the time scale, kind of like military, every 3 years, we kind of PCS and stuff.
Yeah.
And so that building it up quick for the first 2 years, and then, the transition over here in the past year. But I can certainly see one of the things, about this, like I've been working from home most of the time. Yeah. And I realized very quickly, like, I don't really enjoy it that much. I like the ability to be able to do some stuff from home, but I'm also pretty social and stuff, right? And so a variety of things, like, there's other aspects of mental things, like, we don't think about, like, it's super sunny here today, but we have, like, mature trees right outside the house, right? And so it's like, it doesn't look like that much, like, natural daylight in the house. And so I think just from a mental health perspective and things, like, I've become, like, self-aware, over some of these things over the past year, when, like, I'm the only one in the house, it's not super sunny and things like that. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, I recently, started going to, like, a co-working space sometimes to, like, just break up the environment, be around some other people and do things like that. And so that's some, kind of things I'm trying to do, just to, see what works, what doesn't work, what kind of feels right. And, just make some adjustments.
Yeah, I'm selfishly asking that question, and because I find myself doing that, almost the routine stuff, to the point where I'm doing more transactional work at this point, instead of transformational. Like, it's just like, okay, let me just knock these things out because I know they need to be done. And it's like, man, I'm not moving the needle as much as I feel like I should be, or where I'm going to be, and, like, I'm catching myself in that rut. And maybe it's because of the same thing, like, the military forced you to kind of move around all over the place and do different things, and that forces you to kind of adjust your clock right about the time you're getting into a good solid routine on doing those transactional versus transformational. They're like, you're going, go learn something new.
I can really appreciate that aspect of what you just said, though, because I can see that in my own routines over this past year, is trying to protect that time for kids on the front or back end of the day, and have a number of calls. Like, I do some coaching, real estate coaching in a mastermind. I've also been doing some real estate coaching coaching inside the Kinetic Command, and so I have some of those things kind of give me some purpose, a little bit outside of my own business necessarily, but also in between some of those calls, or maybe calls with investors or whatever. Sometimes you are doing those more transactional or, just checkbox type things. And one of the things I've done probably in the last 3 or 4 months is I hire a full-time assistant. And that has, not to say that, I'm still working on that, our processes and our relationship and what she's doing and things. But one of the things I have found is a lot of those kind of checkbox type things between calls or whatever, I'm starting to be able to hand off to her. So, like, when we get finished recording this podcast, I'm not like, I need to do X, Y, Z. It's like, okay, she has that. And, maybe I can block off some more time for those, like, transformational things that you're talking about, right? Instead of, like, just always have, as entrepreneurs, we always have 1,000 things running through our head. But if I can get, 900 of those off of my head, maybe, then I can kind of, hopefully try to create a little bit more time where I have some focus, and, whether I'm creating some content or creating something educational.
Mm-hmm. What sort of tasks have you passed off to the assistant? Well, first of all, how long have you had the assistant?
Since the end of July.
Okay. And then what kind of tasks have you passed off, and how have you made a system, if you will, to make sure that the things that all those checkmark things are still getting done, and, like the mechanics behind that? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we're certainly still, building some of that as we go. But, because one of the things is, like, and this is probably one of the reasons that I delayed for a long time, even though I said a long time ago I was going to hire somebody, is, being able to teach them certain processes within my company. And when I'm the only one, there's a time commitment for me to, record a video or whatever that is to send. But so some of the things, that she's doing for me is, a lot more like, say, we're on a podcast, right? Like, instead of me creating a lot of the content for it, she'll do some audio clips from podcasts. And I guess, a fair amount. So, like, things like that to create for our social media, things like, she kind of helps draft some of my, like, newsletter or investor reports and things. And of course, I, usually I'm the final one to push them out. And so that's kind of at this point, early stages. She preps things and I kind of like look through them. My wife actually has a podcast as well, separate from the business, but in some of those like blank spots when I'm like, I'm traveling the next 2 days, I don't have time to, teach her a new thing or whatever. She's also started helping like my wife with editing her podcast, which frees up space and better for the whole family and stuff. Even simple things when we get like the school calendar or like the sports schedule and things like that, we just forward it to her and she puts it in the calendar. So some, personal and family things of that nature. And so she's professionalized a lot of, my like bio and, credibility packets and things like that. She's doing a lot of things. So some things are like one-time things. Sometimes they're like weekly or monthly. We generally, as far as like systems, like I said, some things we're still working on, but we use Asana, to kind of track tasks and stuff. So put things in there, and it's a lot easier than we do email sometimes back and forth, but mostly the tasks and any kind of files or whatever, instructions, a video, whatever, just all in there. So it's easier to find. And she has access to a lot of my account things through like LastPass. Just to that we're not sharing passwords and whatever, but she can get in to do those things. So it's like I said, it's kind of early. It takes me some time to, a lot of times what I've been doing is as I do a task, I'll just throw on Loom or Zoom or something and record and send it to her, and she'll usually gets 90% of it. Maybe has to come back and ask me like, can you clarify a couple things, and then from there, it's kind of something that she kind of takes over. Or so my intent is just to continue to. I've gotten a lot better where sometimes it's easier for me to just do it and take care of it. And if it's only something that I'm going to do like once or twice, maybe I will. But if it is something that periodically happens within the business, even if it's going to take me 10 minutes longer this time, which it usually doesn't take that long, but like throw on the camera and just talk through it as you're doing the task, and you can just kind of offload off that your plate a little bit.
I've got an assistant that she's crushes it, and she's been doing awesome. I'm so happy that I've hired her. But I know that I've got some more things I could hand off, and that the recording of the videos and everything. Every time I'm doing something, I was like, I should really just record myself doing this. And it's tough. It's just tough to let go of some stuff too, and realize that, hey, like that's why you have somebody. Like,
yeah, it's a lot easier for me though to, and I think easier for me to explain if I record a video versus type it and show, you have to type step by step. And for me to be able to do that, share my screen, she can visually see what I'm doing as I'm talking about it. And I've had her create like SOPs. So anytime I send something to her, one of the inherent tasks of that is to create a written SOP, right? So that should she not be with me at some point in the future, I already have that like library of SOPs for different tasks kind of created. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's definitely and maybe that's a military thing for us too. It's like there's an SOP for everything in the military. It's just what we do. The Air Force is really bad with it. There was one Navy guy once who was at some PME something or other, and a Navy guy was like, "Yeah, we used to always say that if you need to make a decision in the Air Force, you need to find an 06. So that's the only person that can make a decision. And then it's got to be in a reg somewhere. It's going to be written down somewhere. That's the only way that you can make a decision. Is the 06 is going to look in the reg to know what it needs to do, because like the Air Force is terrible with the amount of regs that we have. It's unbelievable. But I think the SOPs are extremely important inside the business side of the house. But So back onto the business stuff a little bit. So your kids, what do your kids think you do in business, and like how much do you expose them to what you do, and what is their kind of understanding of what you do on the business side?
Yeah, it's interesting, and at the age they are, it's hard for them to have a like in-depth understanding necessarily. But I'm trying to teach that a little bit more. But it is funny sometimes when I say like, oh, I was talking to so and so. And they're like, oh, Adam's doing real estate, or Adam's in real estate also. And like, sometimes like I want to ask them like, what does doing real estate mean? But like, anyway, but they, you've tried to teach them a little bit of lessons. So, not to get too far off track from that question, but, we've played like the cash flow for kids and things like that, on some of the finance level and things. So they are starting to grasp a concept around like assets and liabilities and things of that nature, right? So I use that to kind of relate in some other things we do in the house with, appliances or whatever, trying to teach them some of those baseline finance terminology and skills, if you will. But I've taken them since we came back to the U.S., like down to Tulsa. So Tulsa is where a lot of our apartment communities are down there. And I've had the opportunity to take them down there and try to explain and talk to them about like, hey, these are the people that we provide homes for, or like we have like on-site maintenance and leasing and stuff. Like, here are the people that we provide a job to. And so they have some other like tangible things. So like they're well aware, that we acquire apartment complexes in real estate. They're well aware that I spend a lot of time talking to our like investors who invest with us.
Yeah.
But I would say up until this last year, it's been harder to kind of get them to grasp like what it is with real estate and stuff. But now that I've had the opportunity for them to like put eyes on, and so I think that starts to come across a little bit better. But other than that, they know I spend a lot of time behind a computer screen.
My kids definitely understand that, between the computer screen and the cell phone screen. What do you have intentions later on to kind of expose them a little bit more? And if you do, what are you hoping that looks like as they grow up?
Yeah, I'd love to kind of get them more involved in the business, and not like in any way to kind of push them down that road if that's not the road that they want to go about, but mostly just so that they kind of understand the power of real estate, and the options that are available to them. Like, a lot of people just don't know, like, oh, I can be a part of, acquiring apartment complexes or single family or whatever kind of real estate it is. Understand the pros and cons of things. And so, one example recently, so this was actually before I hired my assistant, but I think it's probably still important that I allow her to do it on occasion, is I was working on like a newsletter or an investor report or something, and inside I use Active Campaign, and since I found it, and so I was working on something, my daughter kind of walked by, and surprisingly, she was interested, right? Like, most times I'm behind a computer, it's like, whatever. But she's kind of like, oh, what are you working on and stuff? And so I kind of showed her how I created this, and pulled pictures in and typed some stuff here, and she asked if she could help. And so I was like, yeah, sure. And so I kind of like I was showing her how to use the Active Campaign software and, how to do different things. And she was really enjoying it. Right. And so I think that was kind of cool for me, because a lot of times, when they see us on the phone or all this kind of stuff, they're like, real estate's kind of boring, And so whenever she's excited about something else about it, it's an opportunity just to kind of bring them in to the loop to see different aspects of it, if you will. And even like this, back in early summer, I was speaking at a 3-day conference down in Nashville, and the family went with me down there. And I didn't make the kids sit through 3 days of real estate presentations, but they did come in, when I was speaking and stuff. And they also kind of stayed in the room. My wife and the kids stayed in the room for a couple of more like motivational speakers, if you will, not necessarily real estate specific. But at one point in time, my son started to get a little antsy. So my wife was going to take him. I asked my daughter, do you want to go or stay? And she's like, no, I want to stay, And so that kind of, made me a little warm inside, And so things like that, the Active Campaign, like exposing them, like it was kind of intentional for them to hear some of those motivational speakers and
for sure,
see that there's some other stuff around the real estate other than, the boring sitting behind the computer thing. So like I said, I don't want to push them into anything, but like open up those opportunities, and I, kind of see when they do get excited about something, to see, how they could maybe, where they're a good fit or what they're interested in.
Yeah. For me, I'm a huge why guy, and I've trained my kids to ask why all the time as well. Like, why do you do this? Why do you do that? Why do you do this? So I've done what I can, and I know I could do better, but to show them the why behind why daddy sits behind this computer all the daggum time. Right. And, I've brought them to different properties that we own, talk to them about the work that we're doing and what, having that exposure so they understand that why. I need to do a better job of reminding them, so that they can have that connection as to just what what kind of impact we're able to have in the world, and what we're doing. And same thing, similar to, we've got ADPI, we've got our conference at the time of this recording next week. And I'm, by the time this comes out, it'll be already months ago. So it would have already been a very successful, exciting conference. But now next week, we've got our conference. I'm bringing the kids with. They get to go and see what the company's doing and how many people get to be impacted by what we're doing, and hear the stories and be involved. And it excites me that I get to expose them to that sort of thing. And I just hope that I don't, I don't, oversaturate them with some stuff, and make them want to run away from it, right? Because I think we've all seen some things as kids that we run away from that we never want to have happen as adults, and then I don't want that to be the case here. So it's finding that balance, but also it's extremely important to me to make sure that they understand business and what we're doing. And again, I don't care if they follow this. I don't care if they join the military. I don't care if they, whatever it is they want to do, but I want them to be exposed to as much as I can. So it's and I think it is a balance.
It's kind of hard. Yeah, it's kind of. Yeah. I mean, just like we were talking about earlier with our parents and the work and things like that. It's like, especially like when I was living in England, it was really difficult because I couldn't like physically take them to our properties or whatever. Yeah. So a lot of it is like just talking or trying to explain or whatever. But now that we're back here, and it still takes some effort. It's 3.5 hours, to 3.5, 4 hours to a lot of our properties and stuff from where we live to Tulsa. And so, it has to be kind of planned out to go down there, in about 3 weeks or so, they're going to go down there with me for another weekend. Mm-hmm. And so you have to kind of plan that out to be able to take them or to go to conferences and things like that. But I think it's important for them to have that exposure, whether it's something that they, take on and run with early on after school, or, and if not, maybe not. Maybe they, like you said, they go do something else. But I think it'll be in the back of their mind, right? They'll always at least will been have exposed and know that it's an opportunity, and it might be a few years down the road, but I think it will be impactful.
Yeah. So what is one area you think you are absolutely crushing it as a dad?
Man, this might be a better question for my wife. I'm not sure. Like anything.
No, it's time to toot your own horn. Let's hear it.
Yeah. It's always hard to write our own eval and fit rep and stuff in the military, isn't it? So I think right now, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, is one of the things I'm most proud of in the last year is saying yes to my children when they desired my time, right? And that might seem like very simple and stuff, but certainly, as I mentioned earlier, it was hard in England even at times because I get home from my work and I was trying to build this business. A lot of that was in the evening, and mentally I was thinking I was present with them. My desk was in the corner of the living room, and they're in the same room. I'm like, oh yeah, we're spending time together, but it wasn't quality present time, right? And so, in the last year, all through that, calendar planning and everything like that, right now, I really, really desire to say yes when they ask for my time. And there are some instances in which they ask, and I'm like, man, I really wanted to do X right now, or I have 1,000 things to do. And I think for the most part, I've been good at pausing and just kind of, not, yeah, in a little bit or whatever. It's like, yes, we can go do that right now. And, sometimes it's only 15 minutes, whatever they ask you to do. Sometimes it's literally 15 minutes later, they've, the neighborhood kids or whoever are here, and they've shifted gears and doing something else. But I just think that it was very easy for me to say, yeah, I'll do that in a little bit before. And then by the time I was done, like, okay, they've done, I almost celebrate that they'd found something else to do, so that I could continue to work. And so I think that mental shift for me to be, to say yes 90+% of the time when I can is something I think is important that I'm doing pretty well at the moment.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean that's a extremely difficult thing to do, especially when you're the type of person who's wanting to be productive and get your business done and go through all the stuff. And so what kind of tips would you give a dad out there that is struggling with that? to help them kind of ease that concern and try to and actually be able to execute and saying yes to their kids?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I think we've talked about a lot of different aspects of that. I think one thing is the mental thing for me. Sometimes it's been like literally like reading some books, going, like the family board meeting, like when you mentally think like, man, I only have 18 years, type of stuff, or when we look at statistics of the percentage of, how much time we spend in those first 18 years with our kids versus like after that. And like, so often, as we mentioned earlier, some entrepreneurs say, hey, I'm doing this for the family. But by the time this is where we want it to be, they're gone. Right. And, out of the house, and so am I really going to get to enjoy whatever it is I'm trying to achieve in the business and stuff with them if they're already gone? And so some of it might, depending on where people are, what they have already done and stuff. I mean, it might be, some education, or reminders from that perspective. Some of it could be, joining, I think, tribes like we're in with other men that are, in my opinion, pretty high performing individuals that have likely went through some of the same challenges, right? I think that a lot of times we keep it to ourselves or we voice a bit. Man, when we're in these tribes, like a lot of these men have gone through or are going through similar things, and I think that has been really impactful for me this past 18 months or so as well, because it's not just like you go, read a book and 95% of the time, but it's this continuous cycle of every week we're having conversations, and we're going to drift, but one of those men are going to make a comment or check us a little bit and kind of bring us back, or, they're going to say like, hey, you said saying yes to your children was a priority. But why? So why aren't you saying yes to your children? So, as we kind of talk through this, a lot of those, like joining a tribe with other men might be one of the most important tips I could probably give, because all these other things that I'm thinking about, like designing the calendar and all of that kind of stuff, those are the types of things that, the men can kind of check you on a little bit as you're having those, continuous conversations.
For me, I think that adding that extra piece of the why as well. Again, I love to know why things are happening. And I've joked about it previously on the podcast, but that might be why I didn't fit so well in the military there towards the end, is because I really started to ask why an awful lot, and the military doesn't really like that. They're like, well, because we said so, and that's not. Do I don't really like that. Like, I want to know why I'm doing it. I feel like I'm wasting my time, right? So if you really want to have that involvement with your kids, if you want to have that stuff going on, why is it that you want to be able to say yes? Like, truly, why is it? Not, because I want to be there for my kids. Okay, great. We all want to be there for our kids. So like, why is it that, like, what is it that you feel like they're going to be missing out on? What does it feel like you're going to be missing out on? Like, write it down, understand what the reason is behind it. And, you had a similar situation with your daughter when she was 4, and why are you home? It's light outside. When I had my son come running up to me, taking the trash out, daddy, don't leave again. And it's like, I don't like, to me, I tie that back oftentimes to my why. Like, to me, that is like those kids, that face that I never want to see again is why, like, that's why I'm going to go say yes right now. That's why I'm going to go walk out the door. That's why I don't stop them from coming into the podcast. That's why I want to make sure I'm always there. So if I can replay that face in my brain again and go, no, this is why, like, and I can tie that to something. That's why I'm writing this down on my calendar. That's why I'm starting this podcast. That's why I'm having this conversation with Marcus, because I don't want to see that face again.
That's awesome.
But man, it's awesome. But man, does it hurt? It's,
well, I agree. But yeah, it's awesome that you have something identified that's that strong, right? Yeah. To be able to kind of hold you to it and to be able to recognize that. And I think that, that alone is a step further than, I would be making up a percent if I said, but a vast majority of men, too often we take the traditional answer. Like, everyone says, I'm doing it for my family. Most people say I'm doing it for my family or whatever. But as you mentioned, like, what tangibly, like, when you have something that's that tangible to be able to describe, or, for me, and like I said, we had similar circumstances, but also, like, like recognizing the memories and things that we had in my own youth, and a lot of them didn't require a lot of money and other things. It's like good memories because our family was present together. Right. And so I'm sure there's like some stuff from my own upbringing and stuff that drives some of that desire to be present with them on a regular basis as well.
Yeah, for me, like some of that upbringing side is a big part of it too. Is like my dad worked multiple jobs rather often. He was gone all the time, doing what he thought was best for the family. And it wasn't until I got older that I really understood like why he was the way he was and what he was doing. But then it ties a lot into why I'm doing what I'm doing as well. It's like, I want to be here all the time. I want to take them to golf practice. I want to be there for, when they go to hockey. I want to be there for all this stuff because I didn't really have that a lot, and I was missing that. I try to, and I'm not always, as I'm saying this, I don't feel like I do a very good job with it, but it's one of those, are you running away from something or are you running towards something type of things, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to always be running away from what I missed so that I can be running towards what I think they need, but more I want to run towards them all the time and what they actually need, not versus what I think they need. So it's a conversation that needs to be had with the kids too on what it's not like what do you actually need out of me as a dad, right? That's not what I mean by the conversation, but more like understanding who they are as a human being and what it is that drives them. What kind of things do they feel is love, and what kind of things do they feel mean something to them that I can provide? And I think that's going to make a big difference.
It's interesting. You joke around about that, like not being the conversation, but you might be surprised.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you just ask, maybe not what do you need of me as a dad, but maybe it's how do you think I'm doing as a dad, right? Like kids will be blatantly honest. We have to be prepared again for that reception. Like they might say something that we didn't see coming or don't really want to hear, but they'll be honest a lot of times, right? And I think we can probably filter some stuff if it's just like, oh, we don't buy them all the toys in the world that they want, but there might also be some pretty valuable something they say that is pretty valuable that we don't forget and that we can assign some action to it to kind of address that. There might be something we're not doing that they would love for us to do with them, or something that we do that they're like, why do you do that? So I think
even to what you said though, like you're not buying me all the toys in the world. Okay, does that mean that me as a father, am I putting are my wife and I putting tangible things on such a pedestal that they think they need to be owning all these things? I mean, obviously every kid wants to buy a bunch of stuff. Don't get me wrong. It's just a matter of how can we change that perspective too on what that is. So they could be telling you something that is nowhere near what they're saying, but they're still telling you something, right?
Absolutely.
But what do you think, to go to the opposite end of the spectrum, what do you think you're really like missing the boat on as a dad that you think that you should be, that you're either already working on, or that if you were honest, you should be working on?
Yeah. So I think that probably one of the biggest things that I haven't done well is, and they're still younger, so there is some time, but like when I think about some of the things that I had growing up, and some of it has to do kind of like, maybe like where we live or things like, it's not as easy just to go outside and do it. You have to kind of plan ahead, but when you think about like things like, changing the oil in a vehicle, or like, how to hunt or things like that, it kind of goes back to those experiences, right? That, as I think about some of that kind of stuff, I think there's importance and maybe my son doesn't like to hunt, or they never want to change their own oil or things, but I still think that there's value in, and maybe it's not the changing the oil itself. Maybe it's the experience that you as a father and a son, or you as a father and a daughter, have together doing that and stuff. Right. And so I think that I have to be, I'll go outside and play ball with them. And we as a family, have done we're traveled, and that's, done some of that. We can plan to continue to do that from an experience perspective. But I think I have to be more willing to, and sometimes it's probably a fear of my own. Like, man, I used to change my oil. I haven't done it for a long time. Or like with all the moving around, like, I have some friends that go on hunting trips every year, but and I enjoyed hunting when I lived in a rural area, but I haven't been hunting for a long time. So now it's like this fear, like, oh, do I even know how to do some of these things anymore that well? To be able to actually teach them without going to YouTube University or something. And so they're young, and at 9 and 6, I'm not sure. There's probably plenty of examples of those, but I think as they kind of get up into their double digit years, some of those things could be important moments. And not I use those kind of as a couple of examples. There's probably a lot of other things, but
okay. So is it more? I don't know what the word. It want to be quality time is not the what I'm looking for, but like truly giving them. Is it more like you want to be teaching them more hands-on things, or is it more you want to be giving them more experiences? Because you kind of went down both of those roads.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know that all those. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm trying to think about, like, I don't necessarily know that those like those specific like hands-on things are what are important to me, right? I think it is the moments, the experiences, and they are getting experiences in other ways. But I think that those types of things are a different kind of experience.
Yeah,
right. And I think there's a different, maybe bond and things that happening in some of those moments. And I guess I was just thinking through like the time I spent with my father, and a lot of the things that we did were very hands-on, machinery broke down out in the pasture and stuff. And like I'm not really like that much of an automotive guy myself, right? So I'm probably not going to be the one teaching how to change brakes and all that kind of stuff. And so, but I think that in those moments of doing some of those hands-on things, it's a different kind of experience together than some of the things that we're probably doing.
Yeah, I think it creates an opportunity for conversations that wouldn't have typically happened, for connections and bonding that wouldn't have typically happened. So, I think that challenging yourself to go out and do that so that you do feel that connection and that bonding, and whatever it is that they want to do, I think that's going to be.
I think that as we're sitting here thinking about this, like if probably gave me an opportunity to see my dad be creative, trying to how do I figure out something, how something works, or like, hey, we're building something or whatever, like, hey, what extra lumber pieces do we have over there that we can make this work, and things like that. So an opportunity to do that. And also I think there's some opportunities in there where they get to see us make mistakes,
yes,
as parents, and that we let them see that it's okay to make mistakes, right? And that we can recover from it. Like, okay, we messed that up. And I think that's a lesson for us. Like sometimes we can get frustrated in doing those things. I'll probably do some projects around the house and it should be easier than what it is, right? And get a little bit frustrated. But I think those are opportunities where like, hey, dad made a mistake. That's all right. We'll fix this, And so I think it's important for them to be able to see some of that kind of stuff.
So I don't make mistakes, so I can't answer this question. But can you tell me why you think it's important that the kids see you make mistakes? Like and how do you, or would you prefer to talk to your kids about the mistakes that you made?
I 100% think it's important for them to see us make mistakes and realize that they do. And so some of the reasons I think that is like my daughter specifically is a bit of a perfectionist in many ways, and
boy, don't I understand that.
Yeah, and I'm sure she comes by it honestly, from her parents, in the way that we approach things or things that we say and stuff. And so we probably didn't have an appreciation for that sometimes. But she, throughout her school and stuff, we have been told like, she does great work, but she's very slow, at doing the work sometimes. Or, she gets upset if she's drawing something. There's like one like little, slither of pen over here or whatever. Like she's gotten better where she's like, oh, I'll just make something new with it now. But like for a long time, it's like, no, it's not perfect. I'm going to throw that away and start over. And even other things like when maybe there was a little bit of a, disagreement or something like that, comments that she made about like, it's my fault, like her saying that about herself because of X, or Y. And so I I just think it's important for us to reveal like, hey, I make a mistake too,
Yeah.
And I tried to do things like there's times, maybe I raise my voice or something. And what I realized after is like, they didn't do anything wrong. Like I was in a bad moment. Right. And so I used to be like, I don't have to go apologize. I don't have to say anything. And I have a different mindset about that now. Like I'll go back to them and say, hey, I apologize for raising my voice, for yelling. Like,
sure.
I was really upset about something totally different. And you just happened to be in the wrong place at that point in time. And so, I think when we come and apologize in those kind of situations, they understand that like we make mistakes in different ways. Like it gives them a little bit more, there's a lot of pressure on her, right? If she thinks she has to be perfect about everything. And I think that as they get older and stuff, that can be a dangerous route. If they think they have to be perfect and don't understand that it's okay to make mistakes so that we can recover for them. And what some of the consequences might be, for them not understanding that.
Yeah. My oldest is the same way with the perfectionism and stuff. And I've tried to set that up to where he sees me make the mistakes and he sees me do all this stuff. And now he just came to me and are you all done? Huh? Okay. Nice. He just got done with school. Yay. Awesome. But yeah, the perfectionism thing has been something I've been working hard on. And I just, I've tried to show that like, hey, like this is part of learning. It's making these mistakes, and Daddy makes these mistakes too. And and then part of it is when wondering and tell you, like you were just saying it, and it made me kind of wonder, like, because I do the same thing. Like I want to encourage them to know when they made a mistake and be able to admit it and be able to work through it and apologize. And apologizing is a very good thing. And knowing that you made a mistake so that you can grow from it is a very good thing. But oftentimes I'll put things on me and like, hey, that's completely Daddy's fault. Like I made this mistake. And then as you were saying that, I was like, boy, I wonder if that's one of the reasons he also does it, right? If I've gone, and I don't think it's gone too far, right? But where he's like, okay, well, I need to own all these things just like my dad does. And it's like, boy, I don't know. I'm working through the thought literally as we're talking, so I don't really know what that actually looks like. But I've been really working hard on it the last few weeks of trying to figure out how I can make sure that he allows himself to make mistakes and learn from what is happening around him, and know that just because you made a mistake doesn't mean you're a terrible human being. Like just because you didn't know how to spell that spelling word doesn't mean you're a terrible human being, right? And he'll take, just literally spelling. Like he tested at a 6th grade level for spelling. He's in 4th grade. So we've got him through the 6th grade spelling list. He's going through all this stuff, and he'll miss a word that he's never had to spell before, that he's never even heard of before. And he misspells it. He's like, I can't believe I didn't spell that right. I'm so stupid. I'm like, what? And I have no idea how to work through that.
Because you've never seen the word before.
Exactly. Yeah. Just golly. But and it's trying to discuss something at an emotional level instead of an intellectual level, as logical level, because it's not logical to be upset about that, but emotionally he is. So man, it's tough to work through.
And I think not necessarily on the perfectionist start of it, but as parents, we have to talk about like thinking through things, whether it is logical, emotion, or whatever it is. Like we have to kind of look at and each child's different, as we know, how they react to stuff, and that goes back to like when I first had our daughter and stuff. I thought I'd be a pretty stern parent. My dad was stern. He didn't like yell a lot necessarily, but like still it was pretty stern. And like our years in the military and things, and when my daughter was younger, like the first few times like I really raised my voice or yelled, she shut down. Absolutely just shut down. And I learned real quick that like that's not going to work. Yeah, right. Like she isn't reacting to that, and so getting down on like my knees, looking at her in the eyes, and saying, "Hey, having a conversation." In a normal tone of voice, and talking about like what went wrong, what can we learn from it, what can we do better, things like that was a lot more effective, than anything. So I think with all these things, it's kind of a, it's on the job training a little bit, and with each child a little bit differently. But I think that we have to, as fathers and stuff, can't just nonchalantly or routinely go through, and we tend to go back to how we grew up, right? Like this is how I was parented or whatever. And you said, you either go towards something or against it. But even when we're either way. We can't just like be routine about like, hey, this is how I'm going to parent. I think we have to accept some of those signals back and try to adjust rudder a little bit, to use a bit of naval terminology in there, and our approach and stuff. And sometimes I think that's hard. We have some pride in like, I'm going to parent this way. This is that's the way we always thought we were going to do it. And we have to be able to take some of that feedback and adjust to still get the hopefully the result and stuff that we desired, but in a different way.
Yeah. I completely, and I think we do that with our business oftentimes too, right? I mean, if you look at the market, right, and we say, okay, well, the market's doing this, so I need to be able to adjust here. I've never operated my business in this type of market, but I think this is my best bet, And I look at my boy, and I'm like, hey, I've never parented an 8-year-old before, so I'm learning how to do this just like you are. So now this is my new environment. This is every day my son is a new kiddo. Like how can I parent you better? I've never been. And even like I've told them before, I was like, well, yes, now I have parented a 4-year-old boy before, but I've never parented a 4-year-old boy that has an 8-year-old brother who's also teaching him things. So now I have to, like, that's a new environment, and everything is new. Like all of this is new. I got to be able to adjust fire and move about.
I was just at a conference, real estate conference last week. So we were talking about business, right? And we were there was a lot of discussion about the OODA loop. So you're familiar with those non-military, like observe, orient, decide, and act, right? And it's like that feedback circle. And as you mentioned, like business and stuff, I was like, in many ways, that's the same thing we're doing, with our relationships and our raising kids and things like that as well.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So, is there anything that you would like to bring up that we haven't talked about yet? Do you have anything that, or any questions for me at all as we're coming close to an end on this one?
And I guess we've kind of hit on quite a few aspects, and not to go back too deep into it. I guess one kind of question maybe before we kind of wrap up would just be maybe on some like age appropriate, like kids financial type stuff. So we talked about business and things, but throughout we played at Cash Flow for Kids, Robert Kiyosaki, and different things. I'm just kind of curious, with your kids' ages and stuff like that, if you have any unique. One of the things like we kind of did in our house while we were in England is sold the kids like a microwave and toaster, and turned that into like we rented it out. And now that we're here, we're planning to start kind of doing that with like the laundry and things. But just if there's any kind of creative, or anyone else out there listening, when they hear this, if people have creative things that they have done for those kids, because I think it's important. There's different age appropriate stuff, but also, as we've been talking about, other things that different kids will learn differently too, whether that's through a book, through a game, through something, real life going on. So, whether it's you or others listening, I'm always interested in hearing kind of what they did and how that worked. So something we can incorporate in our own household as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I think for me, there's I'm always trying to ask that same question. So I started wanting to. I talk to the kids about money all the time. I talk to them about finances. I help them, kind of understand investing and what that actually means through conversation. And even if it's, learning how to invest, $20 that you earned by pulling weeds out in the front yard into something, and let's turn that into $35. Let's turn that, let's grow these things and show it how it all works. And but I think, honestly, the cash flow game is something that I really want to go buy, because I've heard nothing but great things about playing that with your kids. My son, actually, we played Monopoly, and my oldest son kicked my butt with some Monopoly. He's going to be a killer real estate investor apparently later on in life, because he was crushing me in that game. But it was a lot of fun to play. But it's I don't know. I would love, anybody that's listening again, put it down in the comments. So there's one. I haven't looked through all of them yet, so don't take this as great advice. But there's a thing called the Tuttle Twins. They have various different. I think actually I got some books back here. Let me see. So they've got, I bought them for like the homeschool stuff, but, the food truck fiasco. So it talks about these kids creating this food truck and going through all the stuff and, the messed up market. It talks about like different market stuff. So then we could talk about, what's going on. And, they're coming more from a libertarian, very free market type of aspect. And again, I haven't read all of these yet, but it's been good thus far being able to have these conversations about what this looks like and what kind of what entrepreneurship looks like and what growing a business looks like. And this is why Daddy does what he does. And but like the actual tactical stuff is a little bit different. I'm part of my homeschool this year is going to be to create a what's the word I'm looking for? Vending machine route, and try to get a couple of vending machines and teach them supply and demand through that. And I can help do some math through the spreadsheets and show them, hey, this is where our money comes and goes on the vending machine side of the house. And
that's
one thing I'm probably going to do. I
know a couple of people that have, probably young teenagers or something that are doing the vending machine thing. It seems to be a pretty solid option to teach some of those lessons with.
Yeah. I started off wanting to do houses, and then because I'm a real estate guy, so that's what fit in my brain. And then I heard about the vending machines through. I don't remember where I was, but somebody said something about vending machines. I was like, I think a bag of Doritos would match my son's personality a whole lot better than an HVAC system. Let me see if I can adjust fire and look at that. So that's kind of the route I've gone. But hopefully we have somebody that one or two people that can put some comments in for both of us to be able to kind of look at it. I've got a buddy of mine, Aaron Velke. I don't know if he still has it, but he had a financial education program for kids, specifically to teach kids about money and all of that. So, he tried to do it more in schools and try to get it as a borderline curriculum inside of schools. But I know that it was open to other people, but I don't even know again if he's still doing that or not, but yeah,
that's great. I think that a couple of conferences I've been to recently and stuff, and I know there's a couple of them that are almost starting like kids masterminds, if you will, and stuff there. And some of those are probably more appropriate, like kind of in a little bit in the teenage years, if you will. So my children are probably a little bit young for that, But I'm just always interested and open to ideas that people have to kind of teach in different ways and just kind of get them exposed to them, hopefully in a somewhat interesting way for them.
Yeah, we one person, I don't remember where I heard it, but it was one of those as far as teaching kids about the usefulness of money and how you could do it. Like give them, hey, you guys know what we eat every week. Even for a 9-year-old like our kids, like it just here's $50. Go walk around the grocery store and see what you could buy for your $50 and kind of understand, what it takes. Like, hey, this is how we earn $50, and then this is what you're spending. So, understanding what the effort it was to be able to get the amount of groceries you have in your cart, just thinking about things a little bit differently. And if you buy 17 boxes of cereal, you already had $50, and now you don't have dinner. You only have breakfast. I mean, granted, I can eat cereal all 3 meals of the day. Don't get me wrong, but but that was another thing that somebody recently told me about that I wanted to kind of implement as well. But just to get them thinking differently.
Yeah, awesome. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, Marcus, it was an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for jumping on. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, get a hold of you, learn some more about the passive investing side of the house or anything else, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I think the best place probably is alonglegacy.com. So alonglegacy.com. And there's a calendar on there. You can schedule some time to chat. It's got my email address, marcus@alonglegacy.com. And, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, any of that. But all the social media is on the website. So, awesome. If anyone wants to get in touch, if I can help them in any way, I'd love to connect.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for jumping on. It was a pleasure chatting with you. Hopefully we get some good comments down there and giving us some tips on how to expose our kids a little differently to money and finances than we're actually looking at right now. But again, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Everybody, appreciate you listening. Please do the like, comment, all those things that I'm supposed to say at the end of a podcast that I almost always forget to say. Share with all of your friends. Listen to it 15 times. Do all of the fun stuff. So thank you again, everybody, and we'll see you on the next one.